Using YouTube on a desktop computer, you can navigate within this song collection from within the description field. This is a very cool feature of YouTube. And here's how that works. First, click on the description field below the video screen, where it says ..more, and it will drop down. You will see a list of audio files with a time underneath each one in hours, minutes, and seconds. When you click on the time in the left column, that gets you to the specific audio you want in the YouTube video screen above. The right column is the running time of the original sound file used to make this audio. So to recap, to select an individual song or audio file from the list and seek to the bookmark time of the audio in this video podcast or album, whatever you want to call it, click on the time in the left column of the list below the audio of your choice, and it will jump to the audio that your heart desires. One final note, the list of times of each MP3 file in these types of lists rounds down in time, so in a long list the accuracy is somewhat lost due to rounding errors. I have not bothered to fine-tune this in the code that I wrote to make these lists, preferring to keep things simple, so you may be plunked into the very end of the previous audio. But that's probably no hardship. I should also mention that when I say click, I often mean double-click. And this is only for a desktop computer, not for YouTube running on a phone or a TV. And now enjoy the music, and consider going full screen.
The right to be reasonable, strong and free. A tale of two nations for all to see. One side of the border, they fight for a cause. The other just flexes and ignores all your laws.
It's the Wild West versus a civilized plea, and the right to be reasonable, strong and free.
It's a Section 1 test, a logical quest. Is this limit definitely justified? We'll put it to the test. Is the objective pressing? The means rational? Oh yes. Our freedoms are an absolute. They're part of a shared success, and we'll balance it out for the common good, you see. In our reasonable, strong, and civilized country. It's the Section 1 test, a logical quest. Is this limit reasonably justified? We'll put it to the test. Is the objective pressing? The means rational? Oh yes. Our freedoms are absolute. They're part of a shared success, and we'll balance it out for the common good, you see. In our reasonable, strong, and civilized country.
It's my right to privacy, a reasonable plea from the digital shadows that are haunting me. My data's a treasure, a part of my soul, and I get to decide how it's lost or made whole.
The law can't be silent, it has to be fair. It's the right to be forgotten, the right to not bear. We're strong and we're free, but we're not naive. We choose a safe path for what we believe. The gun is a tool, not a right that's divine. And we won't let the madness become a lifeline. Our law is a shield that's built on a plan to protect the innocent woman, child, and man. The right to be reasonable, strong, and free.
Right to be reasonable, strong and
A tale of two nations for all.
A tale of two nations. regulations for all.
One side of the border, they fight for a cause.
One side of the border, they fight for a cause.
The other just flexes and ignores all your
The other
laws.
just flexes and ignores all. It's the Wild West versus a civilized plea in the right to be reasonable, strong, and free.
A report on the right to be forgotten in Canada and Google's noncompliance. By Bill Buckles, August 28, 2025. Part 1. The Canadian context, the right to be forgotten legislation. The right to be forgotten in Canada is not a standalone piece of legislation, but rather has been interpreted as an implicit right under the Personal Information Protection and Electronic Documents Act, PIPEDA. PIPEDA is the federal law governing how private sector organizations collect, use, and disclose personal information in the course of commercial activities. Conception and introduction. Influence of the EU. The concept was heavily influenced by the European Union's 2014 Landmark Court ruling and the subsequent 2018 General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, which explicitly includes a right to erasure or right to be forgotten. OPC's interpretation. In Canada, the Office of the Privacy Commissioner, OPC, has been a key proponent. The OPC, through a 2018 position paper, asserted that the de-indexing of personal information from search results is consistent with PIPEDA's principles. This interpretation hinges on the idea that personal information must be accurate, complete, and up-to-date as is necessary for the purposes for which it is used. Canadian Bar Association, 2018. Legal challenges. The OPC's interpretation has been tested in court. A key case began in 2017, where an individual filed a complaint against Google for displaying links to articles about a dropped criminal charge. Google challenged the application of PIPEDA to its search engine, arguing it was a service and not a commercial activity subject to the Act. The Federal Court of Appeal in 2023 rejected Google's appeal, marking a significant victory for the right to be forgotten in Canada and affirming that the operation of a search engine falls within the scope of PIPEDA, the Canadian Press, 2025. Part 2. The current dispute, Google's noncompliance. Following the court's decision, the Privacy Commissioner of Canada, Philippe Dufresne, has made a recommendation in a specific case for Google to delist articles about a dropped criminal charge from search results for the individual's name. The individual claimed the articles caused direct harm, including social stigma, lost job opportunities, and physical assault. Global News, 2025. Privacy Commissioner stance. The OPC argues that in limited circumstances, an individual has the right to have information delisted if there is a risk of serious harm that outweighs the public interest in that information remaining accessible through such a search. The Canadian Press, 2025. The Commissioner's Office is now considering legal options to compel Google to comply. Google's position. Google is reportedly refusing to comply with this specific recommendation. A spokesperson for Google stated that the company remains strongly of the view that consideration of a so-called right to be forgotten must be appropriately balanced with the freedom of expression and access to information rights of Canadians, the news media, and other Publisher 16s. Global News, 2025. Google's core argument is that these legal decisions have not fully considered the impact on freedom of expression as guaranteed by the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. They maintain that while the links may not appear for a search of the individual's name, the information remains publicly available and discoverable through other search terms. Part 3. A deeper dive, balancing privacy and freedom of expression. This dispute highlights a fundamental conflict between two core democratic principles, the right to privacy and the right to freedom of expression. The case for privacy. Proponents of the right to be forgotten argue that individuals should have the ability to move on from past events, especially when information is no longer relevant, inaccurate, or causing significant harm. In an age of digital permanence, a single mistake or outdated piece of information can have long-lasting, damaging effects on a person's life, from employment opportunities to personal relationships. Two, they argue that de-indexing is not an act of censorship, but rather a rebalancing of power, allowing individuals to regain some control over their digital identity. The case for freedom of expression. Critics, including Google, contend that the right to be forgotten is a form of censorship that threatens the free flow of information and the historical record. They argue that search engines are simply a reflection of what is already publicly available, and that de-indexing information from search results, even for specific names, interferes with the public's right to access truthful information. This is particularly relevant for journalists and news organizations who argue that their work should not be subject to removal or delisting based on individuals' request. This is a crucial point in the legal debate, as the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms gives a high level of protection to freedom of expression. Part 4. What if this legislation was in the USA? A hypothetical scenario. If a right to be forgotten law similar to Canada's was introduced in the United States, it is highly likely that Google and other tech companies would be even less likely to comply and would mount a far more aggressive legal challenge. American legal landscape, the U.S. legal system, and its approach to privacy are fundamentally different from Canada's. First Amendment. The First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution provides a robust and often absolute protection for freedom of speech and the press. The U.S. Supreme Court has a long history of striking down laws that act as a prior restraint on speech. Laws compelling the delisting of truthful, legally obtained, and publicly available information would be viewed as a direct violation of this principle. The burden of proof to justify such a restriction would be incredibly high, and it is widely believed that a right to be forgotten would not survive a constitutional challenge. Sector-specific regulation. Unlike Canada's unified approach through PIPEDA, the U.S. has a patchwork of federal and state privacy laws, many of which are sector-specific. For example, HIPAA protects health information, while the Fair Credit Reporting Act, FCRA, regulates credit reports. There is no single comprehensive federal privacy law that would apply to a company like Google in the same way as PIPEDA. No central authority. There is no single federal authority like the OPC with the power to issue binding recommendations for all private sector organizations. Enforcement is largely handled by the Federal Trade Commission, FTC, and state attorneys general, but their powers are often more limited and focused on deceptive practices. Compliance outlook. In this what-if scenario, Google would likely argue that a delisting order is an unconstitutional government action that forces them to censor their search results. They would argue that this is not a privacy issue but a free speech issue, and the U.S. courts would likely be sympathetic to that argument. While some states have enacted right to delete or eraser laws, such as California's law for minors, these are generally much narrower in scope and do not apply to a wide range of content in the same way the Canadian interpretation of PIPEDA does. References. Bennett Jones, 2021, July 21st. A key step towards a right to be forgotten? Federal privacy laws and internet search engines. Canadian Bar Association, 2018, August 27th. Right to be forgotten sets privacy against freedom of expression. Freedom Forum, ND. The right to be forgotten. Everything to know about erasing digital footprints. Global News, 2025, August 27th. Google won't comply with right to be forgotten, privacy watchdog says. Mink Law, 2025, August 25th. What is the right to be forgotten? The Canadian Press, 2025, August 27th. Google refusing to comply with right to be forgotten, delisting decision. Skassa te 2020. Privacy law in the United States, the EU, and Canada, the allure of the middle ground. Toronto Metropolitan University, Law Review. BLG, 2023, February 10th. Canadian Privacy Law, what U.S. businesses need to know.
The right to be reasonable, strong and free.
A tale of two nations for all to see.
One side of the border, they fight for a cause. The other just flexes and ignores all your laws.
It's the Wild West versus a civilized plea.
In the right to be reasonable, strong and free. It's a Section 1 test, a logical quest. Is this limit dim simply justified? We'll put it to the test.
Is the objective present? The means rational? Oh, yes. Our freedoms aren't absolute, they're part of a shared success. And we'll balance it out for the common good, you see.
In our reasonable, strong, civilized country. It's a Section 1 test, a logical quest. Is this limit dim simply justified? We'll put it to the test.
Is the objective pressing? The means rational? Oh, yes. Our freedoms aren't absolute, they're part of a shared success.
And we'll balance it out for the common good, you see. In our reasonable, strong and civilized country. It's my right to privacy, a reasonable plea.
From the digital shadows that are haunting me, my data's a treasure, a part of my soul. And I get to decide how it's lost or made whole.
The law can't be silent, it has to be fair.
It's the right to be forgotten, the right to not pay.
We're strong and we're free, but we're not naive. We choose a safe path for what we believe.
The gun is a tool, not a right that's divine.
And we won't let the madness
Become a lifeline.
Our law is a shield that's built on a plan to protect the innocent woman, child, and man. The right to be reasonable, strong and free.
A tale of two nations for all to see.
One side of the border, they fight for a cause. The other just flexes and ignores all your laws. It's the Wild West versus a civilized plea. In the right to be reasonable, strong and free.
A comparative report on gun violence in the USA under Democratic and Republican presidencies. By Bill Buckles, August 28, 2025. Gun violence statistics in the United States show a complex and varied picture, often influenced by a combination of social, economic, and political factors that go beyond a single presidential administration. When analyzing the data, it's clear that focusing solely on a single president's term doesn't provide a complete or nuanced understanding. However, by comparing administrations, we can observe trends and changes in the rates of gun-related deaths and injuries. Part 1. Analysis of U.S. gun violence by presidential term. To provide a fair comparison, we will use an averaging methodology comparing the 4-year terms of each president. We'll use data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, and other credible sources that track gun-related deaths, which include homicides, suicides, and unintentional deaths. Obama's last term, 2013 to 2016. During the final years of the Obama administration, the United States saw a concerning rise in gun violence. Gun-related homicides, in particular, saw a notable increase, especially in major metropolitan areas. Point 1. Average annual gun deaths. The average annual number of gun deaths during this period was approximately 35,000. Key trend. The rate of firearm homicides increased significantly from 2012 to 2013 to 2015 to 2016.2. For example, the national firearm homicide rate rose from 3.7 to 4.4 per 100,000 residents. The number of firearm homicides in major metropolitan areas increased from 14,086 to 17,128, a rise of over 21%. CDC MMWR 2017.3. Trump's first term, 2017 to 2020. The beginning of the Trump administration saw a continuation of the upward trend in gun violence, with a dramatic spike in the final year, largely coinciding with the COVID-19 pandemic. The total number of gun deaths during this period was higher than in the previous administration's term. Average annual gun deaths. The average annual number of gun deaths during this period was approximately 40,000. Key trend. By 2020, the last year of Trump's term, the country experienced the largest single-year increase in murders ever recorded. While some sources attribute this to the pandemic, social unrest, and economic disruptions, the overall trend was an increase in gun deaths, with some estimates placing the total number of gun-related deaths at over 100,000 in the first 3 years of his presidency alone. Everytown, 2020. Biden's time in office, 2021 present. The Biden administration inherited the elevated gun violence rates from 2020. However, recent data suggests a significant and historic decline in gun violence, particularly in homicides. Average annual gun deaths. The average annual number of gun deaths, while still high, has seen a recent decline. 0.5 in 2023 and 2024. Gun deaths dropped for 2 consecutive years. The trace, 2025. 0.6. The total number of gun deaths fell below 45,000 in 2024, the first time in 5 years. 0.7. Key trend. Gun homicides, in particular, have seen a historic drop, with some analyses showing a 13.1% decline in 2024 compared to 2023. Mass shootings have also decreased. This decline has been attributed to a combination of factors, including the Biden administration's legislative actions like the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act and other policy initiatives aimed at reducing crime. The Trace, 2025. Summary and conclusion. Based on the available data, domestic gun violence measured in deaths went up during Donald Trump's first term when compared to Barack Obama's last term. The average annual gun deaths were significantly higher during the Trump administration, approximate 40,000, than during the final years of the Obama administration, approximate 35,000. This represents an increase of over 14%. Joe Biden's time in office saw a peak in gun deaths in the first year, largely a carryover from the pandemic spike, followed by a substantial and sustained decline in the subsequent years. The decline under Biden has been so significant that it has been called the largest 2-year drop in gun violence in American history. Part 2. Comparison with Canada's gun violence ratio. To put the U.S. statistics into a global context, it's useful to compare them with a country with similar social and economic demographics but different gun laws, like Canada. We will use a per capita ratio to ensure a proper comparison. USA, with a population of over 330 million, the average annual gun death rate during the period of this report, 2013 to 2024, was consistently and dramatically higher. In 2022, for example, the U.S. had a gun-related death rate of 12.2 per 100,000 people. Canada, in contrast, Canada has a much lower rate of gun violence. With a population of approximately 40 million, the rate of firearm-related homicides was 0.38 per 100,000 in 2013 and rose to 0.63 per 100,000 in 2023. Statistics Canada, 2024. The difference is stark. The U.S. gun homicide rate is consistently more than 10 times higher than Canada's. While Canada has seen an increase in firearm-related violent crime in recent years, its overall rate remains a fraction of the U.S. rate. Conclusion: the comparative data highlights a fundamental difference in the scale of gun violence between the two countries. While Canada has also seen an increase in gun-related crime, the sheer volume and per capita rate in the United States remain in a different category. The U.S.'s high rates of gun deaths, regardless of which party is in power, are a unique and persistent challenge on the global stage. Part 3. References. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. 2017. Firearm Homicides and Suicides in Major Metropolitan Areas, United States, 2012 to 2013 and 2015 to 2016. Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report, MMWR. Everytown for Gun Safety. 2020. 100,000 plus Americans have been killed by gun violence since Trump took office. The Trace. 2025. Newest CDC data confirms gun deaths fell in 2024, but were still higher than before the pandemic. The White House. 2025. A report on record low crime during the Biden-Harris administration. Statistics Canada. 2024. The Daily, Firearms and Violent Crime in Canada, 2023. Pew Research Center. 2025. What the data says about gun deaths in the U.S.
The right to be reasonable, strong and free.
The right to be reasonable, strong and free.
A tale of two nations for all to see.
One side of the border, they fight for a cause. The other just flexes and ignores all your laws.
It's the Wild West versus a civilized plea.
In the right to be reasonable, strong and free. It's the Section 1 test, a logical quest. Is this limit demonstrably justified? We'll put it to the test. Is the objective pressing the means rational? Yes.
Our freedoms aren't absolute, they're part of a shared success.
And we'll balance it out for the common good, you see, in a reasonable, strong, and civilized country.
It's the Section 1 test, a logical quest. Is this limit demonstrably justified? We'll put it to the test.
Is the objective pressing the means rational? Oh yes.
Our freedoms aren't absolute, they're part of a shared success.
And we'll balance it out for the common good, you see, in our reasonable, strong, and civilized country. It's my right to privacy, a reasonable reasonable, strong and free.
A tale of two nations for all to see.
One side of the border they fight for a cause, the other just flexes and ignores all your laws. It's the Wild West versus a civilized plea, in the right to be reasonable, strong and free.
The Wild West versus Civilized Freedom by Bill Buckles, August 28, 2025. The stark difference in gun violence between the United States and Canada, as highlighted in the previous report, is not merely a matter of policy, but a reflection of fundamentally different philosophies of rights and freedoms. This can be seen in the legal frameworks that govern everything from gun ownership to online speech. A key example is the ongoing dispute between the Canadian Privacy Commissioner and Google, which illustrates the clash between a civilized approach to rights and the Wild West ethos often associated with the American legal system. Philosophical foundations: absolute versus reasonable limits. The core distinction lies in how each country's supreme legal document frames individual rights. The American way: Congress shall make no law. The U.S. Bill of Rights, particularly the First and Second Amendments, uses what's known as absolutist language. The First Amendment states, Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, and the Second Amendment protects the right of the people to keep and bear arms. This language creates a presumption that these rights are nearly absolute and cannot be infringed upon by the government. While the U.S. Supreme Court has created exceptions, like for incitement or defamation, the default position is one of broad, expansive liberty. The burden of proof is high for any law that seeks to limit these rights. This legal philosophy, when applied to a tech company like Google, means the First Amendment's protections for speech and the press are often extended to corporations. Courts have largely ruled that a private company's content moderation and search algorithms are forms of expression and are therefore protected, making it very difficult for the government to compel actions like de-indexing information. This is why Google, an American company, is more likely to resist a right-to-be-forgotten ruling by arguing it's an issue of free speech and not just privacy. The Canadian way: subject only to such reasonable limits. In stark contrast, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, 1982, is grounded in a philosophy of reasonable limits. Section 1 of the Charter explicitly states that all guaranteed rights and freedoms are subject only to such reasonable limits prescribed by law as can be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. This single clause transforms the entire legal landscape. It means that while a right like freedom of expression or privacy is protected, it can be limited if the government can prove, through the Oakes test, that the limit is necessary to achieve a pressing and substantial objective and is proportionate in its effect. This allows for a balancing act between individual rights and collective societal interests. The Canadian legal system is designed to be more communitarian and to prioritize the well-being of the group. The Wild West versus Civilized Freedom, application to specific issues. The philosophical difference translates directly into real-world outcomes, particularly in the areas of speech and gun control. Freedom of expression, the Google case. The first report's example of Google's non-compliance with the right to be forgotten ruling perfectly illustrates this divide. In the U.S. context, a similar right to be forgotten would likely be seen as an unconstitutional infringement on free speech. The legal principle is that truthful, publicly available information cannot be censored. The focus is on the publisher, Google, and their right to publish, not on the individual's right to privacy. In Canada, the law PIPEDA and the courts have a different framework. The Privacy Commissioner is able to argue that an individual's right to privacy and the protection from harm from outdated, irrelevant information can, in certain circumstances, be balanced against freedom of expression. The courts can compel an action like de-indexing if it is deemed a reasonable limit that is demonstrably justified by the harm it prevents. This demonstrates a more civilized approach where the rights of one are not allowed to cause undue harm to another without a legal reckoning. Gun violence, a direct consequence. This same philosophical divide explains the vast difference in gun violence rates. The American approach on guns is an extension of the absolutist philosophy. The Second Amendment provides a robust, constitutionally protected right to bear arms. This has been interpreted by the Supreme Court to mean that Americans have an individual right to possess firearms for self-defense. This legal protection makes it exceedingly difficult to pass and implement sweeping federal gun control legislation, as it would likely be struck down by courts as unconstitutional. This is a direct consequence of a legal system that prioritizes the individual's right over the collective safety of the community, leading to the Wild West scenario where the freedom to own a gun is largely unrestrained. The Canadian approach on guns is subject to the same reasonable limits as any other right. While Canadians have the right to own firearms under certain conditions, this is not a constitutionally entrenched right. The government can and has passed strict gun control legislation banning certain types of firearms, requiring licenses and registration, and restricting access to weapons, all of which are considered reasonable limits, demonstrably justified in the interest of public safety. This reflects a more civilized legal view where the right to own a weapon is seen as a privilege that must be balanced against the societal need to reduce violence. Conclusion: the American and Canadian legal systems, particularly in their approach to rights and freedoms, represent two divergent paths. The American Wild West model, with its emphasis on near-absolute individual rights, has led to a legal environment where companies like Google can more easily justify their actions and where gun ownership is deeply protected, with the unfortunate consequence of high rates of gun violence. The Canadian civilized model, with its principle of reasonable limits, allows for a more nuanced and communitarian approach that can balance individual rights against the broader public good, as seen in its approach to privacy and gun control. This fundamental difference in legal philosophy is a key factor in explaining why the two nations, despite their similarities, have such different outcomes on these critical issues. References: Bennett Jones, 2021, July 21st. A Key Step Towards the Right to be Forgotten? Federal Privacy Laws and Internet Search Engines. Hill Notes, 2022, November 17th. Freedom of Expression, Recent Jurisprudence. Mink Law, 2025, August 25th. What is the right to be forgotten? Department of Justice Canada. ND. Charterpedia, Section 1, Reasonable Limits. The Canadian Press, 2025, August 27th. Google refusing to comply with right to be forgotten delisting decision. U.S. Constitution, Amendment I, Amendment 2. Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, S1.
The right to be reasonable, strong and free. A tale of two nations for all to see.
A tale of two nations for all to see.
One side of the border, they fight for a cause.
One side of the border, they fight for a cause.
The other just flexes and ignores all your laws.
The other just flexes and ignores all your laws.
It's the Wild West versus civilized plea.
And the right to be reasonable, strong and free.
It's a Section 1 test, a logical quest. Is this limit demonstrably justified? We'll put it to the test. Is the objective pressing? The means rational? Oh yes. All freedoms aren't absolute. They're part of a shared success.
And we'll balance it out for the common good, you see.
In our reasonable, strong and civilized country, it's a Section 1 test, a logical quest. Is this limit demonstrably justified? We'll put it to the test. Is the objective pressing? The means rational? Oh yes. All freedoms aren't absolute. They're part of a shared success.
And we'll balance it out for the common good, you see.
In our reasonable, strong and civilized country, it's my right to privacy, a reasonable plea from the digital shadow that are haunting me.
My data's a treasure, a part of my soul, and I get to decide how it's lost or made whole.
The law can't be silent, it has to be fair. It's a right to be forgotten, the right to not bear.
We're strong and we're free, but we're not naive. We choose a safe path for what we believe.
The gun is a tool, not a right that's divine. We won't let the madness become a lifeline.
Our law is a shield that's built on a plan to protect the innocent woman, child, and man.
Behind the songs, a closer look at the right to be reasonable, strong, and free song suite. Copyright Bill Buckles, 2025. All rights reserved. The right to be reasonable, strong, and free song suite was crafted to explore the distinct legal and cultural philosophies of Canada and the United States, as highlighted in the provided reports. Each song uses a personal narrative to bring these complex ideas to life, showing how laws about privacy, gun control, and the Charter of Rights and Freedoms directly impact people's lives. Song 1, Ghost in the Machine. Scenario: A young professional, a few years into their career, gets passed over for a job because a potential employer found an embarrassing social media post from their high school days through a simple search. The professional's request to have the post de-indexed from Google's search results is denied. How it relates? This song directly addresses the core conflict from the first report, the right to be forgotten. The Canadian character embodies the belief that personal history can be limited to allow for a fresh start, a concept rooted in the idea of balancing individual rights with the public good. The American bully character represents the more absolutist view of free speech, where public information remains public and there is no legal requirement to de-index it. The chorus captures this philosophical clash between a more civilized approach and the American Wild West of information.
I had a history, a digital past, a moment of shame, a shadow that's cast. I asked for a break, a chance to start new, to let the old me fade from public view. Our charter says balance, a right that is true, a civilized way to see things through. Hey buddy, I'm Google, the king of the net. I'll show what I want, you're not done with it yet. My First Amendment is broad, it's a rule of the land. You can't tell me what to do with my hand. My servers are here on American soil, and my free speech is protected from your petty toil. The right to be reasonable, strong and free, a tale of two nations for all to see. One side of the border, they fight for a cause, the other just flexes and ignores all your laws. It's the Wild West versus the civilized place. In the right to be reasonable, strong and free. I just want a chance, a fresh start for me, to not have my life defined by a digital decree. Your search results haunt me, a perpetual score. You don't understand how it gets to be that hard. Your feelings ain't my problem, I'm a public domain. If it's on the web, it's part of the game. I got a monopoly
Song 2, Two Flags, Two Fears. Scenario: a Canadian parent watching news of yet another school shooting in the United States has a conversation with an American friend. The Canadian is horrified and baffled by the American's unwavering defense of the Second Amendment, even in the face of such tragedy. How it relates: the song explores the Second Report's issue of gun control from two very different emotional and legal standpoints. The Canadian voice reflects the country's preference for collective safety, where gun laws are seen as a necessary and reasonable limit on a potential freedom. This is contrasted with the American voice, which sees gun ownership as a non-negotiable right essential for personal protection. The song highlights the fundamental difference in how these two cultures view freedom, one through a lens of collective responsibility, and the other through a lens of individual, armed autonomy.
I grew up with peace, a calm kind of life. My children can play without fear of a knife.
Our laws are strict, a logical choice. We don't need a pistol to give us a voice.
We protect our community, that's what we do. Our freedom is rooted in what's safe and true.
My right to bear arms is a name on the page, a constitutional duty, a national stage.
You can't take my rifle, you can't tell me no. I need it for protection, a beautiful show.
Your freedom is weak, you're so easy to scare. I'm a man with a gun, I'm ready to dare.
The right to be reasonable, strong and free. A tale of two nations for all to see. One side of the border, they fight for a cause. The other just flexes and ignores all your laws. It's the Wild West versus a civilized plea in the right to be reasonable, strong and free. I look at your news, the grief and the dread. Another school shooting, more innocents dead. You call it a right, a liberty's price. I call it a tragedy, a gamble with life.
You're so naive, you just don't understand. I am the last line of defense in this land.
I need all my weapons to feel safe inside.
You want me to surrender with nowhere to hide.
The right to be reasonable, strong and free. A tale of two nations for all to see. One side of the border, they fight for a cause. The other just flexes and ignores all your laws. It's the Wild West versus a civilized plea in the right to be reasonable, strong and free.
Song 3, the Section 1 test. Scenario: a first-year law student is studying for their constitutional law exam and has to explain the Oakes test to their study group. They use the scenario of a law banning hate speech to illustrate how the government can justify a limit on a charter right. How it relates: this song moves the focus entirely to the Canadian legal framework discussed in the third report. It explains the Section 1 test, also known as the Oakes test, from the R. v. Oakes case in straightforward way, breaking down its 4 parts: the pressing and substantial objective, rational connection, minimal impairment, and proportionality. The song's narrative shows that Canada's charter isn't just a list of rights. It's a dynamic document with a built-in mechanism for balancing those rights with the needs of a free and democratic society. The lyrics directly reference the legal terms and process to illustrate how limits are justified in Canada.
Our charter's a shield, a promise we hold, a story of rights more precious than gold.
It starts with a clause, a simple decree that freedom has limits for you and for me.
The government can't just take a right away. It has to be justified, come what may. It's the Section 1 test. Logical quest: is this limit damnably justified? We'll put it to the test. Is the objective pressing? The means rational? Oh yes. Our freedoms aren't absolute. They're part of a shared success, and we'll balance it out for the common good, you see. In our reasonable, strong, and civilized country. Connected and in its right place.
Does it minimally impair the right just enough? And does the final balance show its stuff?
It's the Section 1 test, a logical quest. Is this limit damnably justified? We'll put it to the test. Is the objective pressing? The means rational? Oh yes. Our freedoms aren't absolute. They're part of a shared success, and we'll balance it out for the common good, you see. In our reasonable, strong, and civilized country. When hate speech is shouted for all to hear and harms a community, fuels anger and fear.
We don't just stand by, we're not paralyzed.
Our law steps in, our values are prized.
We say no to the hate, not to the thought.
Because that's the good fight our system has fought. It's the Section 1 test, a logical quest. Is this limit damnably justified? We'll put it to the test. Is the objective pressing? The means rational? Oh yes. Our freedoms aren't absolute. They're part of a shared success, and we'll balance it out for the common
home with a sense of at ease.
Our rights are protected, but never at cost.
We won't let our freedoms be carelessly lost.
We'll balance the needs of the many and one,
until the day our long journey is done. It's the Section 1 test, a logical quest. Is this limit demonstrably justified? We'll put it to the test. Is the objective pressing, the means rational? Oh yes, our freedoms are an absolute. They're part of a shared success, and we'll balance it out for the common good, you see. In our reasonable, strong, and civilized country.
Song 4, Our Right to Privacy. Scenario: a person in Canada is trying to get a news article about their past removed from a local newspaper's website. The newspaper resists, arguing it's public information. The person files a complaint with the Federal Privacy Commissioner, leading to a legal fight. How it relates: this song is a direct reflection of the Canadian-only privacy issues raised in the final report. It highlights how Canada, unlike the U.S., has a legal framework that gives citizens a formal right to be forgotten, or more accurately, the right to have their personal information protected. The song's verses describe the process of engaging the Privacy Commissioner and the court system. The chorus reinforces the idea that privacy is a fundamental right that can be legally defended against the interests of media outlets or corporations, demonstrating Canada's commitment to protecting the individual.
They say that the internet has no memory, but they don't understand the Canadian decree. My story is private, the details are mine. You can't put my past on a public design. I told the old company, a giant with a plan, you must take it down. It's my right as a man. It's my right to privacy, a reasonable plea from the digital shadows that are haunting me. My data's a treasure, a part of my soul, and I get to decide how it's lost or made whole. The law can't be silent, it has to be fair. It's the right to be forgotten, the right to not bear. The company told me we're in an ocean of data. We can't change the truth or rearrange a past data. But the law is our compass, a guide to the right, and it says you can't just spread things in the light. The commissioner listens, the courts will all see that my privacy matters as a person to me. It's my right to privacy, a reasonable plea from the digital shadows that are haunting me. My data's a treasure, a part of my soul, and I get to decide how it's lost or made whole. The law can't be silent, it has to be fair. It's the right to be forgotten, the right embellish your words. You have a loud voice, but you don't get to slander without a free choice. We'll argue the merits, we'll fight for the good, to ensure that all people are well understood. It's not about censorship, it's about a new start. It's about protecting the human heart. It's my right to privacy, a reasonable plea from the digital shadows that are haunting me. My data's a treasure, a part of my soul, and I get to decide how it's lost or made whole. The law can't be silent, it has to be fair. It's the right to be forgotten, the right to not bear. So when the world's watching and you're feeling small, remember our law and how it stands tall. It protects you from harm, from a web that's too wild, and makes sure your rights are not just compiled. A civilized code for a civilized land, with the right to be reasonable right in our hand. It's my right to privacy, a reasonable plea from the digital shadows that are haunting me. My data's a treasure, a part of my soul, and I get to decide how it's lost or made whole. The law can't be silent, it has to be fair. It's the right to be forgotten, the right to not bear.
Song 5, Guns and the Common Good. Scenario: a Canadian citizen reads an op-ed about gun rights in the U.S. and feels a sense of relief and pride in their own country's stricter laws. They reflect on the differences and how Canada's approach, while sometimes seen as less free, actually leads to a safer society. How it relates: this song focuses on the Canadian perspective of gun control, as outlined in the third report. It frames the country's approach not as a restriction of freedom, but as an expression of a different, more mature value system. The lyrics directly articulate the philosophy that the community's common good is a higher priority than an individual's desire for unrestricted gun ownership. It contrasts the Canadian view that a gun is a tool to be regulated with the American view that it is a fundamental right, and argues that the former is the path to a more peaceful, reasonable, and strong society.
So walk your own path, if it's what you choose. We'll mourn for your dead, and listen to the news.
But we'll stand on our ground with a firm, steady gaze and build a safe future in all of our days.
We choose to be reasonable, strong, and humane, and we'll stand in our peace through the wind and the rain.
We hold no obsession, no unholy bond to a piece of cold steel we can look beyond.
Our founders, they chose a different path,
To not live in fear of a killer's wrath,
our law is designed for the community's sake.
to prevent the heartbreak and the sorrow.
We're strong and we're free, but we're not naive. We choose a safe path for what we believe. The gun is a tool, not a right that's divine.
And we won't let the madness become a lifeline.
Our law is a shield that's built on a plan to protect the innocent woman, child, and man. We see your debates, the arguments loud. Another sad vigil, a heartbroken crowd.
You say that more weapons would make you all safe, while children are dying and mothers still chain.
We'll license the hunters, we'll train them with care, but we won't let our streets become a nightmare.
The government has the right, the duty to act, to put laws in place, a safety pact.
To ban the assault weapons, to keep them away from a school or a church at the end of the day.
It's not an opinion, it's a fact of the law, a civilized freedom that's without a flaw.
We're strong and we're free, but we're not naive. We choose a safe path for what we believe.
The gun is a tool, not a right that's divine. And we won't let the madness become a lifeline.
Our law's a shield that's built on a plan to protect the innocent woman, child, and man. So walk your own path if it's what you choose. We'll mourn for your dead and listen to the news.